Then I took a smidge and applied it down there.
This One's Wife. Bankruptcy. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. The vast majority of you that listen to my work do not like This One's Wife. You understand that she's a narcissist. You dislike her unpleasant behaviours, her lies, her revisions of history, her crassness, her lack of class, her attacks on people that deserved better. I know that many of you want to see her downfall. This is not as a consequence of some irrational hatred of This One's Wife, but instead is driven by the fact that you want her to receive a comeuppance, some form of justice as a consequence of her behaviours. I know, for instance, that there are those of you who want her to be exposed as having had a career as a yacht girl. Also, those of you who want her to be exposed because you believe that she was never pregnant with the children. That you want the full extent of her bullying of staff to be exposed. That you want to see her crash and burn because she is a vapid, unpleasant bully who is a narcissist. I've explained previously why the grand exposure wouldn't happen, because as a consequence of absence of evidence in some instances and the fact that the media benefit from a death by 1,000 cuts approach, that she is the cash cow that keeps on giving by virtue of views and clicks and advertising revenue, that they're not going to expose her to the extent that it would cause her to crash and burn, but rather to maintain controversy and criticism in respect of her. However, there is some aspect of her life that will result in her downfall, which isn't actually going to be directly governed by exposure. And this relates to her financial circumstances. Let us go back in time. This One's Wife came, despite her protestations more recently, from a middle-class background. As a consequence of the work of Thomas Markle Sr., This One's Wife lived in a decent enough house, had her tuition paid for at a private school, and was supported by her father in her endeavours. She then became a jobbing actress who ran a blog. She earned a decent enough living, being well paid for the episodes of Suits in which she appeared, but she could not be described as being rich, and she also faced uncertainty as she was going to be written out of Suits. Remember, This One's Wife is a narcissist, so what matters to her? Subconsciously, control of everybody that she deals with who comes upon her radar, the receipt of fuel, character traits, and residual benefits. One of the most significant residual benefits is money. This One's Wife is a somatic narcissist. That means that she has a preoccupation with material things, appearances, being seen, being with the beautiful people, with her looks, and in relation to money. Money is hugely important to her, because through money, her narcissism can then use it to control other people, for instance, through the purchase of PR puff pieces, by buying a large house so that people will react to that and provide her with fuel, by allowing her to buy expensive clothing and jewellery, which will cause people to react to it, thus providing her with fuel and, in some instances, control. It will allow her the opportunity to do certain things to allow her to manage her facade. And thus, the acquisition of money as a residual benefit is hugely important to this particular somatic narcissist because it aids with the continual receipt of other aspects of the prime aims. Thus, her narcissism drove her to try and acquire more money in simple ways such as stealing shoes from shoots, from monetizing the TIG, from trying to trade up in relation to her relationships, both intimate and non-intimate, to try and penetrate the scene in Toronto, to make connections, to find a sponsor. Potentially, her somaticism drove her with regard to the allegations of being a yacht girl, that she earned money by entertaining wealthier men, using her somatism in a sexual way whilst receiving payment for it. But it still wasn't enough, because her narcissism wanted more. It wanted more people to control, more fuel to receive, and therefore get more money, because having more money would help with those things. And then enter a dumb ginger prince. He was wealthy. It was jackpot time for her narcissism, and thus she suddenly found herself in an environment whereby she had a multimillionaire husband. She had multimillionaire relatives. She got to spend time inside beautiful buildings and palaces, although she thought she would be living in a castle, and was disappointed when she found that she wasn't, and she was staying in Nottingham Cottage and then Frogmore Cottage. She believed that she would be having more. She got the clothing allowance from King Charles, and notice how she abused that, spending ridiculously. Millions were spent on her wedding. She expressed her concern about how she wasn't getting paid. "I can't believe I'm not getting paid for this," she said when she was in Australia, because what matters to her? The residual benefit of money. She was dismayed that she couldn't keep gifts that had been sent to her because it breached protocol. Why? Because gifts equates to money, part of the residual benefit. And therefore, her narcissism said, "This is good, but he's not as wealthy as you thought he would be. We need more." And therefore, her magical thinking and her deluded mindset told her, leave the royal family, and you can now monetize your worldwide fame so that you can become massively wealthy in your own right. Go to America. They'll want to hear all about you now because you are a bona fide royal with a title. You're an American who has become a duchess. The land of the free and the home of the brave will be delighted. They'll be throwing money at you to hear your story. You can tell them all about what it was like being in the royal family. You can disclose all of that. And thus off she went. And at first it began rather well, as the deals came with Spotify and also with Netflix. She got a mansion, a huge mansion with 46,000 bathrooms, acres of garden. She had a staff. She has security, lives in a gated community. She's money to spend on PR. She's got money for clothing and jewellery and holidays and to fly in private jets and goes to swanky places. She's in the place where the A-list live. This is what her narcissism wanted her to achieve. But wait, this all costs. And she and the Prince of Pink Pancakes are actually not as well off compared to their neighbours or the people that they wanted to fraternise with. No matter, there would be more money available, surely. This one's wife would find a way. The cosmetic giants would sign her up, paying her vast fortunes for the purposes of being associated with their products. Oh, it didn't happen. She would model for the fashion houses and be paid huge sums. Oh, it didn't happen. The Netflix deal didn't provide her with as much as was first envisaged, and there are huge question marks over whether there'll be any continuance of the deal come the autumn of this year, and even if there is, it's bound to be on far less favourable terms than that which she's enjoyed. Her initial Spotify podcast, they didn't receive all of the money there, and Spotify got rid of them. Lemonada will not have paid much for her. The income started to dry up. The book, The Bench of Stench, was a disaster. She's utilised, as we know, Archwell for the payment of expenses, but those donations have dried up. The charities are being scrutinised. People are asking questions about their funding. The political climate has shifted also within the United States, which would be deemed as less favourable to this one's wife. And all of this means that she has got a taste, a huge taste, for the high living. That her narcissism now equates, as a consequence of her delusion, an entitlement to live in a big house and to have security and to have PR paid for, and that she can afford expensive clothing and jewellery, and therefore she must continue to have all of these things. But wait, she's got champagne tastes on a beer budget because the money isn't flowing in. She started as ever, but that's not going to lead anywhere for reasons that I don't need to go through once again. And here is where her downfall will come from. Whilst there might be the possibility of exposure, I still regard it as unlikely. Even if the relationship with Harry founders, that doesn't necessarily mean that she's going to crash and burn. You may find that she will never truly go away because she will always court publicity. But there is something that there is a considerable likelihood of occurring. And again, it's driven by her narcissism, which is she will find herself in bankruptcy. Why? Because, first of all, her narcissism has made her such an unattractive prospect that those that have got money will not want to place it with her. They won't want to enter into contracts with her, they won't invest with her, they won't continue to pump money her way. Furthermore, she will not cut her cloth to deal with the reduced income that she will experience, because her narcissism has got a taste for the high life, and therefore she believes that this should continue. You will find many narcissists are financially haphazard. Not all, but many are, because they're driven by a sense of entitlement. They show no accountability for their behaviours. Because they want it, because their narcissism deems that they should have it, they then end up overspending, using other people's money, taking out loans, defaulting on the repayments, taking out credit cards and then not making repayments, taking out loans and credit cards in the names of other people, engaging in criminal conduct in order to fund the lifestyle, because they want the premier lifestyle, but they can't actually afford to pay for it. And this is where this one's wife is going to end up. Because she has no discernible talent that she can monetize, because she lacks popularity, because what she could monetize was her victimhood, but that's grown stale, and she's got nothing to replace it with. She isn't a businesswoman, she isn't charismatic, she isn't a singer, she isn't a dancer, she won't be able to write fascinating novels. Therefore, she's got nothing to sell, and her experiences have already been sold and used up, so nobody's going to be interested in that anymore. And people aren't interested in her because she's a pleasant person or that she's hugely popular. And therefore, her income level is going to drop. It already has. And yet she has all of these expenses remaining: staff, security, PR. And she will not reduce her expenditure in relation to clothing and the places that they go. And she will still want to travel on private jets. And while she'll try and crib that money from other people, she will not settle for having been up there in the rarefied atmosphere of the wealthy for a period of time. Her narcissism will cause her to want to cling to that, even though she doesn't have the means of paying for it. And because she doesn't think ahead, because she's focused in the moment by her narcissism, this means she will continue to spend, and she will continue to spend, and Harry will be expected to fund it, and then he finds out that he can't, because all of his funds have been frittered away by her profligacy. And the result is that ultimately bankruptcy will beckon for this one's wife. You can see the downward spiral in relation to her income, and you can see that she will not adjust her tastes because her narcissism demands that she remains prominent and wealthy, even though she will no longer be that. She will not be able to cope with a reduction in circumstances because that would amount to a massive threat to control. And therefore, in order to nullify it, her narcissism will continue to cause her to spend money, to pay for the PR puff pieces, to spend money that she hasn't got in relation to clothing and jewellery and going to swanky places. It won't let her reduce her expenditure. And if Harry attempts to tell her to do so, then he'll be met with devaluing behaviours. And therefore, you will ultimately see the downfall of this one's wife, because ultimately bankruptcy beckons for her, driven by her narcissism. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.